We're making progress. We are frickin' flying. I am ecstatic.
Another fantastic fit.
Incredibly exciting news.
You're going to want to stick around to the end to figure out what that last one was about. I guarantee it.
All right, let's poke some holes in the firewall where we may or may not need them, hopefully need them. I'm going to start by running a cable. I have a ton of cables to run. I'm waiting on hardware for most of them, but I can go ahead and run the hardware and the line for the oil cooler door, the project that keeps on giving. That'll be almost the end of it. I'm using, of course, the temporary 3D printed actuator arm, and we'll get into the real arm in a little bit here. All right, before I go punching holes, I do want to step back for a second. I have gotten some work done a little bit off camera because it's sort of tedious, and I'd love to go through it. All right, let's do a quick rundown of where we are at, because I've been a terrible person and I've done some work off camera. Quite frankly, it's miserable work to begin with, and I just didn't have the patience to film it. I drilled several holes in the firewall, some of them allowing me to tidy hoses and wires, placing Adele clamps on the forward side of this in order to start to get my cable and wire and hose organization underway. While I was in firewall hole making mode, I went ahead and drilled the 4 holes that hold in the voltage regulator for my alternator. That's now loosely mounted on the inside. Loosely only because I can't get it fully tightened without somebody on this side or that side. So it's just hanging there for now until I get someone to hold a wrench for me. That means that I can get the alternator wired up and that project sort of put to bed for now. And I will be doing that in a little bit. But we aren't done putting holes in the firewall just yet. We're gonna poke some more. The first one being the control cable for this oil door project that has been ongoing. I think that looks about as good as any. That will almost allow me to put that part of the project to bed. Of course, we still have the actuator arm, which is still 3D printed in plastic. And I'm gonna take some time a little later in this episode to show you how we're gonna get to an aluminum part. Let's share some other successes while I'm at it. There have been plenty lately, and I love that. First of all, major frickin' shout out to the folks at TS Flightline's aircraft specialty. I have been a sort of a nuisance with some hoses, and I owe them a huge thanks for helping me work my way through this. Not only are they getting me the correct hoses, the amount of consultation and help with things that, quite frankly, aren't even in their realm of responsibility has been amazing. If you are starting your firewall forward project, I would suggest getting in touch with them to get your hose package ready, start to get your measurements. You definitely want these guys on your project. One example is this hose here. Because I rotated my fuel servo, I wound up with just copious amounts of hose from the factory hose. I sent them the dimensions. This is one where I measured right, and it just fits perfect. It takes what was such a sloppy looking system and it makes it freaking tidy. Now, they don't know this yet, but my screw ups are not done. I have wound up with a hose where my geometry was slightly off, so we are gonna have to have one remade or remanufactured. Luckily, it's just a hair too long. I think they might be able to shorten it for me at a cost, one that I'm more than happy to pay, because again, these guys have been great. So with that, most of the fire sleeved hoses and firewall forward plumbing is nearly there. The other project I've been working on up front, of course, the baffling, and yet another success. As I noted last time, I had my preliminary run completed of the baffles for the tapered cylinders. I made some adjustments, I got those pieces, I've bent them into shape, and they fit amazingly well. I've got 3 out of the 4 of the cylinders mocked up. They will get riveted on. They're perfect. I have no changes. The last one is cylinder number 3. I haven't bent it yet, but I have a feeling it's gonna fit as well as the others. With the cylinder baffles, the tapered cylinder baffles nearly there, I can start to work forward more on the rest of the baffling kit, which involves heat muff and heat intake, of course the air intake and all of that. We're making progress. We are frickin' flying, and so with that, it's time to drill some holes. All right, well, I think that looks about as good as any. Holy crap, let's get you caught up. All right, oil cooler door. Oil cooler door's in. It works. I got the linkage hooked up. It goes through the firewall. I got a knob in place. This thing functions. With the sole holdout of that arm. The arm functions, it's just not the permanent solution there. More on that in a bit. Everything else is looking fantastic. I'm about ready just to bolt this in for the last time. Shouldn't be a surprise at this point that I wasn't always intending to have this oil cooler door, so it also shouldn't be a surprise that I didn't have a plan for the control within my panel. This is a problem. That panel was difficult, to say the least, to get it planned out, to get everything positioned, powder coated, labeled, machined, all of that. And now I have to add a knob. The best I could figure out to do is replace the alternate air knob with the oil cooler knob. I am going to be using the oil cooler doorknob far more often. It makes sense to have it in a central location with the rest of my primary flight controls, throttle, mixture, prop, all that. So out with the alternate air, in with the oil cooler door. That of course means I need to figure out how to relabel it. Labels, you can't do small runs. It was like $170 plus shipping just for one label that said oil cooler door, which is not an element or an amount I desire to spend on this right now. Luckily, I did have some spares, and we played a little Wheel of Fortune with different words that I had extras of, and I was able to spell out oil door. This meaning, though, having to place the letters one by one. I think I got it pretty well. It's a little off center, but I'm gonna chalk it up as a win. There's a little discoloration where I had to get through the old varnish to get the lettering off, and accidentally went just a bit into that powder coat. You'll be able to notice it. I will certainly be able to notice it, but again, I think it's a very minor thing. That does mean I'm gonna need to figure out somewhere to put my alternate air knob. I have an idea, more on that far down the road. All of my temperature sensors, exhaust gas temperature and cylinder head temperatures are installed. We saw a bit of that last week. A lot of work going into these, and they are hard cables to run. I was originally going to use Deutsch connectors. I thought it would have been cleaner. However, the leads on these things felt like something I shouldn't just be chopping off. Not to mention there wasn't really enough room without completely re-engineering things to be able to replace the connectors that are on there with a pin and get it into a Deutsch connector. So I'm using what it came with. They're kind of hokey and they certainly are difficult to run. It's going to take basically all I have to figure out how to get these bundled up and looking sharp. Speaking of wiring, both PMags fully wired, fairly straightforward, just fairly tight quarters, but I got left and right in there. They are all locked down. That portion of the wiring looking great. I'm able to get some now dedicated cable runs are starting to coalesce, and I like how it's shaping up. We'll be adding to that just with one last element that I haven't tackled yet. That's the regulator for the alternator. I got a couple wires to pass back and forth. I did get the regulator mounted to the interior of the firewall. It needs to be on the cold side. That a bit of a struggle. Started mapping out my preliminary runs for the spark plug cables, which is, again, exciting. I feel like things are really coming together. A little bit more work to do there. I've got these incredibly overpriced connectors from Spruce, but they work great. Everybody utilizes them. I don't want to be out of that loop, and so they're on my plane too. However, on the starboard side, I hadn't fully mapped out where that's going to go. I got it mapped out, but I don't want to go grinding away on all that aluminum while the baffle's still in the engine. It just doesn't make sense to have all that metal shards polluting the firewall area. So I'm going to cut that out fully when I get these baffles off. We are absolutely flying, and I'm going to do my best not to lift my foot from the gas. There's a couple things in my mind that we need to do next, and so let's just frickin' dive right in again. So originally I had an alternator field cable coming to the alternator from inside, and that's normally what you would do, but because my alternator is internally regulated, it needs to go to the regulator, which is just on the opposite side of this firewall. And then from the regulator, we have a run to the alternator. So we're getting there. It's just a few more steps involved. What I have to do now is to take that original field wire and chase this wire back through the firewall using that, and then get everything connected to the regulator. I'm gonna get everything in there I can to try and prevent the in and out, but at this point in the game I'm not disillusioned enough to think that I still won't have to make like 7 more trips to the workbench. I think I got most of it though. Oh no. I spent a long afternoon, 4 to 6 hours installing this regulator with about half of that crammed up underneath that panel. Now, you can avoid the... Actually, you know what? I haven't been this thin in years. There we go. You can avoid that if you go ahead and install your regulator before you button up your forward skins. If you do that, this would probably be a 1-hour installation. It's very straightforward when you have the access to do it. All right, well, after roughly 2 hours of being wedged under there, I can finally say it's installed and it's done right. The wiring I kept as tidy as I could, and it looks really purposeful back up under there in case somehow someone finds themselves down there. I also know it's working because when I hit the alt field, I can see my amps increase over on my display. It's because we're diverting some electrical energy to create the field for the alternator. I also know it's working because if I go and spin that by hand, it's a little tougher to spin than when that is off. So everything checks out. I'm going to move on. Well, the first custom baffle is installed. How can I get it back on the plane is the question.
One more fitted, and it looks
as good as the first.
Alright, another fantastic fit.
They're all there, and they're all riveted on except for this front one because it's going to be tied into the rest of this, which means I should probably just keep marching forward on the forward baffles. All right, last we left off, I communicated the need to get some help, possibly from a few of you, in order to produce an aluminum part to replace some 3D plastic printed parts that I had. The amount of people that reached out was truly overwhelming. I was blown away with the amount of people willing to spend some time to help me out. And I thank you all profusely for sending me emails and text message and Instagram messages. It's been so cool just to see how people want to contribute to the project. Now, I'm on a path to getting something done myself, and I've communicated that to most people. However, if you're one of those, fear not. Eventually I'm going to screw something else up and I'll pop up with another need that you can help out with. For now, I'm going to try and tackle this on my own, and I'm going to do so with this guy right here. I went out and I purchased, true to myself, a very cheap CNC router. I've been affectionately referring to it as Millie Bobby Brown, because I can't think of a better name. But Millie here is going to help me machine this part eventually. The idea was, why pay someone, you know, $100 or $200 to mill this part and then have to wait like a week for it to come in the mail, when I could simply DIY it for probably half the cost and half the time. So I spent $350 on this mill here, and I figured that would pretty much get me to where I need to be. Well, I also had to spend like $50 on some router bits, and then of course we need aluminum to mill, so I spent like another $40 on aluminum. But I figured this stuff would probably stretch over the next couple parts that I need too, and therefore saving me money in the long run. It also got delivered quite quickly, and then I figured, you know, I'd be off and running. So I went out and I got a cheap subscription to SolidWorks and some actually free post-processing software, and started tinkering away on some toolpaths for this machine. Unfortunately, it was very quickly evident that the 300-watt spindle that came with the machine was simply not going to cut it. Now, it was made for hardwoods and plastic and things like that, but I figured we could stretch the capabilities of the machine just a little bit and delve into some soft metals. But unfortunately, the engineers over at Vever who make the machine had that same philosophy of stretching capabilities, and I think that's how they got to the hardwood and plastics point in the first place. So I was stuck trying to figure out how to get this thing to work, and the only thing that I could find online is that I needed a better spindle. Enter the Makita 1.25 horsepower palm router that I added. Now, of course, you can't just bolt that straight to the machine. You got to buy the $150 spindle and then the $30 adapter and pay for shipping. But eventually I was able to bolt that up, and it was clear that was the key. This thing now chews through aluminum, and I'm ready to rock. Now, the Makita is 1.25 horsepower. The stock Vever spindle, which is just garbage, was 300 watts. Now, even 300 watts was better than some of the other ones I saw on the market, but far below the Makita. If we're looking for comparable power ratings, the Makita comes in at about 900 watts, a little over that. It's almost 3 times the power. And if you're stuck on animal-related power references, this thing 1.25 horsepower, the Vever somewhere around 1 nearsighted alpaca. The machine does come with some cool features. It has a little touchpad, which is extremely useless, and you just got to plug it up to the computer and basically throw that thing away. And it also has a little Z probe gauge, which is very useful in finding the surface height of your material, so that you can accurately go back and do tool changes with this, or work with stock that is very, very close to your final dimension, both of which I did for this part. I've been milling some pieces and some test articles just to make sure I know what I'm doing, which I don't, but I feel a little more confident that I can get this thing done. Here now, some of my adventures with the CNC mill. I'm heartbroken, man. I got what was nearly a finished piece off of the Millie Bobby Brown, and it was still stuck to the base. Turns out you need to measure your stock. My stock sold at 3/8 inch was actually about 25 thousandths larger than that, which makes sense. You know, 2x4s aren't a 2x4, even though we're working in the other direction there. Anyways, I should have measured it. I wound up with more than I could just like sand through to free this part. And I thought, well, I just flip it upside down and do a clearing pass, a face pass, and that would free it up. Well, I took too much off, and now my arm, it's musical. It's super thin. It's maybe, I don't know, it's probably like 010 aluminum, and that just ain't gonna cut it. So, try it again.
The next attempt no more successful, unfortunately, as we had some hold down issues that created some stepping in the design, and even more fatal was a hard Z-axis stop where as soon as we went too deep, the program was canceled and there was no chance of recovery. In fact, it would be roughly 2 or 3 more attempts before I got something usable off the machine, proving that maybe this wasn't quite as easy or cheap as I had originally thought.
I am ecstatic. I got basically a finished part. It's still got some of the attachment tabs that I'll need to file down, but I adjusted a few things in my file. You can see now that bottom layer where it was cutting through to the spoil board, just like paper thin. So it was nearly perfectly calibrated there. The arm now plenty thick, plenty sturdy. I stuck with that radius, that fillet, just to make my life a little more difficult. But it looks great. It'll work on the finished piece. The only thing through all this is my center hole is never centered on this, I guess we'd call it an island. It's always a little off, and I don't know why. I think it's something to do, well, I don't know. I'll figure it out. It's probably something to do. It probably has something to do with the limitations of the machine, and I say that because it's never off in the same direction, which tells me it's probably a mechanical issue we're dealing with. It doesn't help that I'm reefing on the thing while doing 3 or 4 tool changes because of my goofy little fillet that I wanted. I'm going to sand these tabs off and clean up my appreciable mess back there,
and then get back to actually building an airplane. This has been a fun distraction.
I am absolutely blown away. You see, I've been incredibly anxious, a little bit behind the scenes, that something could prevent me from getting airworthiness in a timely manner, and that's been my registration. I was behind a little in applying for registration while I waited for a serial number from my engine. I've also heard that the registration process can take up to 6 months or longer. That would mean that I'm out further than I would like to be able to get airworthiness on this thing. And of course, without airworthiness, there will be no first flights. All those concerns, however, gone in one fell swoop. This morning, I received from the FAA the registration for this aircraft, meaning that there's really nothing stopping me at this point from getting airworthiness. Except for, of course, a finished airplane. But we're working on that, and that's on me. So a check mark in a box next to an item that is outside of my control, and I love having those. That way it's really just on me to get this thing done. I couldn't be more excited. I'm so happy that I don't have to have this hanging over my shoulder and be concerned about this anymore. And once again, the ball is in my court. Now, as far as getting this ready for airworthiness inspection, well, I've got a ways to go, but I'm gonna keep cracking away at it, and I'd love for you to be there. So if you haven't, go ahead and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you like this episode, and we're gonna catch you next time on Ryan Flies.